People who have had to drain their life savings on a single event, what happened? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. A wombat undermined our house to build his burrow, nearly $50K in foundation repairs, plus $200 in chicken wire to keep him out. Now he's done the same thing to the shed, so $5K to build a new shed on the other side of the property. Here he is, old fat bastard himself. Story 2. Double whammy, quit my job to start a business with 1 year of savings. 3 months later, COVID, then skin cancer, then colon cancer. My jerk can never retire. Answer. Hey, similar for me too. I'd been struggling with some chronic health issues. I made a change in career, then was hit with 3 surgeries back to back and being unable to work for about a year. I did everything right and still almost lost everything. I've been rebuilding for over a year and it still feels so tedious. I can't fix it for you, but I do want to let you know that you didn't do anything wrong. This system sucks. Story 3. Father was eliminate himself with adult beverage. He was without insurance after a layoff, and his wife just left him. Me and my legend of a sister pooled our resources to get him into an inpatient rehab. He's almost 3 years sober and still a pain in our jerk, but we love him. Answer. Your story really reminded me of, see, my old man's got a problem. He lives with the bottle. Now that's the way it is. He says his body's too old for working, but his body's too young to look like his. My mama went off and left him. She wanted more from life than what he could give. I said somebody's got to take care of him, so I quit school and that's what I did. Story 4. Just as I was building a decent savings, I suffered a non-work-related injury. I was out for a year and medical bills wiped my savings. Started over with $500 in my account. Answer, Marika. I had brain surgery at 23 right out of finishing post-secondary education and was off work for 2 years. My surgery, MRIs, CTs, tests, and hospital stay were zero. I was off work for 2 years. This was 2017, 2019, and was able to live off my savings, thankfully. But I couldn't imagine having medical bills on top of that. The U.S. really sets their people up to fail. Story 5. I suffered a massive bilateral pulmonary embolism in January 2024 at 36 years old and was out of work for months. Back to work now, but had to start over with my savings. Answer. A couple of months ago, I made a comment on some social media stating the difference between America and Europe, where a medical situation could leave you ruined financially or you didn't have to care except fight for your health. I was called out and ridiculed, but your situation wouldn't cost me anything. That's a lie, maybe 100 euros. I hope you are doing better, but darn, that should not ruin your future. Story 6. Taxes. I was young, early 20s, and my folks couldn't afford the taxes on the family farm. Took my entire bank account to get that settled. Happened a few more times throughout my 20s. I often wonder if I just should have let it go. Story 7. My husband got double pneumonia and was in the hospital in an induced coma for 8 weeks. He did regain consciousness and was transported to a critical rehab center. I had 1 day with him before he became catatonic and was transported to another hospital. No obvious reason given, although several large bruises on his arm and stomach. While he was there, I reviewed his charts to find that he was being administered fentanyl every 3 hours. He said he was in no pain and was hallucinating continuously. I questioned the staff and left messages to the doctors that went unanswered. Later that day, as I hugged him, I noticed that his abdomen was rock hard. The doctor on staff ordered tests and found sepsis throughout his entire system. After much thought, I ordered the life support turned off. 10 minutes later, my hubby of 44 years was gone. So, made a complaint with the Bureau of Hospitals and was told they couldn't find any malpractice, even though his computer-generated charts had many entries at 2, 3, 4 a.m. stating reviewed progress with patient and family no. I wasn't there then, and he was in a coma. So, $4.3 million with about 20 not paid by insurance drained $401k, IRA, in answer. I'm sorry for your loss, and that is a heartbreaking story. Just thought I might fill in some gaps or explain from the staffing perspective of healthcare. It's impossible to know exactly what happened without more information and the chain of events, but it's very difficult to find a hospital responsible for malpractice, the intent to do harm. A more likely and still difficult to prove negligence would be more likely. Again, very difficult to prove without a clear-cut example of the hospital outright not doing something. Regarding the fentanyl, if he was comatose, he was probably intubated and therefore probably needed pain relief medication. Fentanyl is the most common with intubated as it is fast-acting and also wears off rather quickly, and it doesn't tend to affect the patient's blood pressure like other analgesics. morphine, hydromorphone. Patients being pain-free is also required to maintain ventilator synchronicity. Regarding sepsis, it's often pretty insidious, meaning it can be brewing for a while before showing any signs that it's present. Even then, by the time symptoms develop, it can already have caused systemic damage that can cause multi-organ system failure. There are specific assessment tools that hospitals utilize in electronic charting, usually every 4 hours in critical care environments, to detect signs of sepsis as early as possible, and still they can be missed. Regarding the charting, mentioning talking to family at weird hours, that is most likely due to laziness, copy-paste. Many physician notes are copied from previous notes, either a small blurb written as an update. The family notification may have just been included in that copied part. It seems unfair and is surely not accurate, but when a provider has 15 patients and is writing notes in all of them, this is the quickest way to do so. Again, it's not accurate, but the primary focus is the medical information and progress plan in the provider's eyes. The reality is that everyone caring for your husband has some form of medical license, MDs, RNs, NPs, PAs, RTs, even residents if it's a teaching facility, and they not out to do nefarious things and risk losing their license. Sure, there can be bad actors, but if nothing was discovered by your lawyer, I would try to take that for what it is and focus on your family and future. It's a terrible thing that happened, and I'm sure everyone tried their best. Story 8, age 21, $12K in the bank, time to backpack around Europe. 2 thumbs up. Age 26, was very depressed, had IDK 6K, decided to go on the Great American Road Trip. 2 thumbs up, do recommend. Age 32, had 50K in bank account, had cerebral spinal fluid vein collapse, 2 years catatonic. Brain surgery helped, but still can't work. 2 thumbs down, do not recommend. Story 9, I was trying to get a better job. The employee said I was perfect, but they wanted someone local. I emptied my bank account and cashed in what little I had in my 401k to pay for the move. I went all in, and it paid off in the end. But man, I can't tell you how terrified I was that we could become homeless, and it would have been my fault. Answer, I hired someone who moved across the country. The most stressful time of my life in that period. I really wanted to bring him on and work with him, but I was so terrified that the offer would somehow be rescinded out of my hands. Just because I'm the hiring manager doesn't mean shooting corporate. Can you imagine, in spite of all good intentions, having to tell someone to fudge off while moving their family and leaving them with nothing? Story 10, stroke and divorce. I've had to dip into my IRA. If that wasn't there, I'm not sure what would have happened. Story 11, my teenage son was in a car wreck. He was airlifted in a medical helicopter. He was in ICU for 2 weeks, had 8 emergency surgeries and was on 10 different IV medications, on dialysis, was in a medical-induced coma, was on a ventilator and was tube feeding. He ended up passing away. We were off work for a couple of months, had his funeral, and it took all of our savings to be able to make it through. Life sometimes happens unexpectedly. Story 12, my wife's cancer. Spent every dollar I had, leveraged all the credit I had. Now I live in my car, but she has secure housing and food to eat, so I have absolutely no regrets. Story 13, my mom died and my brother was homeless from it. Had to pay for the funeral, which was not cheap, and get my young brother set up. I'm young as well, so there is time to build it up again. Story 14, terminally ill child. I made 6 figures, but as a single mom quit to care for my child in Oct 2013, cashed out my GOVT retirement, $200K, all went to medical costs. Nursing care and caregivers were $9K a month, $5K after insurance and Medicaid. My folks spent $300K of their life savings on his care. He passed away July 2022. I have been chipping away at the massive medical debt that I have 0 retirement, would do it again in a heartbeat. Story 15. CPS brought my grandchildren to me and said, sorry, we can pay you as a foster parent and we can't help you get any food stamps or anything. But here are you badly abused grandchildren. If you don't take them, we have to send them back to the abuser. $15,000 for clothes and furniture, and a bigger house and providing basics of life until court, which was $8,000. Then I finally got a little financial help, but I am still supporting 3 of us on $1,600 a month in cash and benefits. Life savings gone, credit score dropped 200 points in a year, and as they will be living with me another 10 years, I am already 60. I know I will never dig myself out of this hole. If you aren't able to take care of children, don't have them. Answer, my mom took in my little brother's kids. She filed for custody after realizing how bad their living situation was. After a year of court proceedings, ruled custody to the biomom. After 2 months, Biomom decided she didn't actually want the kids after fighting for them in court. My mom now has the kids, but can't get help from the state because custody was granted to Biomom. She is 62. These kids are 57. This will drain her. Story 16. My son passed away at 19. I worked my whole life to raise my family and finally got out of debt and started saving. Now I'm $6K in debt from burying my son. Story 17. I had a few grand saved, but was offered an entry-level software developer job on the other side of the country. I used that money to pay for an apartment, pay for the move, and other expenses. Getting your first job as a developer is incredibly difficult, particularly for self-taught. Although it was probably easier 11 years ago when I did it, it worked out, moved on to a better paying job, and the career has never lost steam since. Answer. Getting your first job as a developer is incredibly difficult, particularly for self-taught, although it was probably easier 11 years ago when I did it. This is 100% accurate and almost exactly the path I followed. However, I had a huge advantage. I was doing tech support for our company's highly specialized software application when their dev team had an opening for a junior dev for that exact same app. Gave me a huge advantage, and as an internal candidate, was able to get in front of the right people despite not having the resume to back it at the time. Story 18. Cat emergency surgery. I was 19 and working in fast food, only had $4K in savings. They saved him, but he became a tripod kitty for his last 6 years. Answer. My wife did the same thing with our Chihuahua before I met her. She was 19, he was 7 months old, hit by a car. She burned all her high school savings from working at McDonald's to save him. They took a rear leg. Now he's 12. I met him when he was 4, and we just took him for a 40-minute walk. Has the best puppy. I'm sure your kitty lived a great life. Story 19. Partner's business failed. She borrowed money from my 83-year-old mom, and I emptied out my Roth IRA to save it. A month after handing over everything, she decided she was poly and wanted to sleep with her coworker. I tried to handle it all, but it absolutely broke me. It's been almost 2 years and she's still fighting the divorce. Story 20. Cyclone Marcia hit. My town is nestled in between a bunch of mountains. It should have been all but impossible for the cyclone to pass over us, but somehow it picked the gap and went right over the top of us. A 2.5-ton gum tree in the neighbor's yard snapped at the base and landed on the roof of the unit I was renting. At the time, I was sleeping in my bed. I was awoken by the crack of the tree breaking and opened my eyes to watch the lead branch come through the roof right above my bed. All of the windows in my unit imploded, and the unit flooded. I lost 95 of my possessions, and that's when we found out that our conservative PM Tony Abbott had drained the natural disaster slush fund. I'm already broke and now unable to work because all of my gigs would be canceled until the town had rebuilt, was granted a total of $850 by the government to rebuild my life. Had he not misappropriated the money, I should have been eligible for about $10K. 6 weeks later, when I finally had a new unit to rent, I spent that money on a bed. Luckily for me, the owner of the warehouse had heard about what happened. And when that bed was delivered 2 weeks later, he had gifted me an entire house's worth of furniture and appliances to go with it. Everything I needed to start my life again, except a car, which I had to replace because it died in the cyclone too. If it weren't for that man's generosity, I would still be rebuilding that life now, 10 years on. I will never forget what he did for me. Just as I will also never forget what the LMP allowed to happen to the natural disaster rebuilding funds. Story 21. It wasn't instant, but could have been. Siphoned off my father's retirement while he went to assisted living, then memory care. Alzheimer's can eat a bowl full of male body part. Story 22. Partner and I both got our cars stolen in pretty short succession. You need a car to live, so, oh, well, there goes my life savings. It wasn't a lot, LOL. We ended up moving house closer to public transport, so we'd only need to buy one car. It worked out well in the end, but man, it sucked at the time. Story 23. Divorced, we had significant debt and decided to pay it all off with our savings so we could both walk away scot-free. He got the house and furniture, and I was given $2,000 to start over. It was really hard to bounce back, but now I'm happy that I got all new things and not living with the memories of our Marshall items. Story 24. Pregnancy complication led to my wife almost losing her life, our twins being born premature, and ultimately they didn't survive. I have no money, no savings, no kids, just a wife trying her best to cheer me up on what should have been my first Father's Day. Story 25. Roof replacement, unexpected travel for a parent funeral, planning paying for the other parent funeral, sickness, so emergency oral surgery, all in the span of a month. Story 26. Husband wanted to move to Montana, sold everything, gave up a fully paid house. I went up first with 2 kids because I had a job and housing lined up. Husband arrived 2 months later, declared he disliked the town, refused to work or contribute to the family in any way. He wouldn't even babysit. We gave up 2 years later. We're divorced 2 years after that. Story 27. Happened twice. First time. My wife and I were fostering medically fragile infants. One of 3 families in Texas at the time, qualified to do that. We had a nurse living with us and had 24-hour care for 2 of the infants. We, flat, loved it. You feel a very strong purpose when you are opening your home to such a complex set of challenges. Needless to say, my per-monthly bills for everything we were doing exceeded $10,000 per month. I was let go from the job I had for 14 years. Bad politics in the office, and my whole team was ditched. We were able to make it 2 years on everything we had saved. We ended up having to retire from fostering and had to sacrifice everything but some furniture and personal effects. Second time, wife started uncontrollably throwing up, even drive heaving, and we tried to figure it out on our own, but after this coming and going, it was now nonstop. We called an ambulance and my wife was in the hospital for 4 months. Sure, insurance was present, but my out-of-pocket drained us down again to just $2,000 to our names. I am about $4,000 away from recovering from that. Bonus item, my wife had numerous procedures and 5 to 9 operations. We lost track among all the other tests. She was sent home with basically the same condition and a bunch of meds. And after 2 days, she stopped the meds cold turkey, so to speak, and slowly popped right out and back healthy. A 1-day difference. We found out later that it was part of her lupus and part medicine combos that triggered the lupus reaction. She's strong and mows the lawn just because she gets to prove to herself that she's back and better than ever. She also has a playlist on her iPhone for mowing the lawn that might actually cause unsuspecting victims a shock. Thrayin, Trillerin, Kedi, to anyone facing this situation. You can and will overcome it, and you will have gained so much personal growth. Endure it, have a plan, and execute it. The comfort you will get from having a plan and sticking to is it peace of mind and good rest at night. Personal experience I'm sharing with you here. Answer: I don't know why your comment out of all of these is what struck me the most, but it did. My husband and I have had a hell of a time over the last 2 years. In spring of 23, we suffered a miscarriage. My husband and I were devastated, but decided to keep trucking along with our little boy we had. Then we got another positive pregnancy test, and we were so ready for things to start looking up. Then that autumn, my poor husband fell victim to a pretty sophisticated phishing scam, and we lost our entire savings in an instant. He was devastated and racked with guilt. I was so worried about him and just wanted him to stop beating himself up. But the guilt seemed to start taking a literal physical effect on him. He was losing weight and getting cold and irritable all the time. We chalked it up to the stress of everything in our lives. My husband had just become a partner in his practice, and we had a 2-year-old on our hands. But in the spring of 24, I finally took him to the ER because it was just getting too bad to continue to hand wave away. And long story short, they discovered he had colon cancer, and the tumor had split and was causing him to very slowly bleed out internally. I was 32 weeks pregnant when they gave us the news. Luckily, the hospital he was diagnosed at was the main hospital he takes call. It takes his surgeries to. So many of the doctors and staff grouped together to perform emergency surgery on him that night after what should have been the last patient. I was so grateful. Again, long story short, it was stage 2B, and he started chemo a couple months later, a few days after I gave birth to our second son. He finished his 6 months of chemo and got his first scans, and everything was clear. And then within 2 weeks, 2 more bombshells hit. My best friend of over 20 years was eliminated by a tipsy driver, and my husband's business partner boss somehow reneged on their contract and has been making my husband's life a living hell at work for months now. We've taken all our new savings out and asked family for loans in order to buy out his non-compete so he can go work at a competing practice while he also is trying to start a business he can run simultaneously. But my husband is so profoundly depressed, and I'm just running on fumes trying to keep everything from falling apart the best I can. I so truly hope what you say is true, that we will overcome this. It feels like 10 years of life experiences have happened to us in a span of 2, and I'm just so exhausted and heartbroken. I keep trying to tell myself that this is temporary and we're going to be so relieved when we're on the other side of it, but man, deep down I'm so scared that the other side won't ever come. So it was so wonderful reading your story. I'm sorry that all happened to you and your wife, but I'm so glad y'all made it through. Story 28, maternity leave. Company initially agreed to fully cover it 100, then with 8 weeks left decided the policy didn't apply to me on a technicality and said the rest would be unpaid, and they need to reconcile what I've been paid thus far. Our childcare arrangements cannot start earlier than planned, so going back to work ahead of schedule isn't an option, nor should I have to consider it with a 2-month-old baby, but welcome to America. Answer: that sucks. Did you ever fight the decision, legally or with an employment bureau? You've got absolutely no choice in that situation. You can't just leave the baby at home. Ours was maternity too. Kid is 2.5 now, and we still have no savings. I've had to drop down to working part-time due to chronic illness. So we're paycheck A to paycheck A every month and borrowing money from family to get by. Story 29. It was 2 events in rapid succession. My beautiful, sweet, funny son died very suddenly and the funeral needed to be paid for. 2 months later, my much-loved dog got sick, needed round-the-clock care, and that drained the rest of it, plus having to use credit cards. He ultimately died horribly. Story 30. I was 19 and lost everything I had in a fire except my car and the clothes on my back. My parents abandoned me when I was 16, and my extended family did not want to help me, so I had no support. A week later, my car was totaled, and the insurance payout only covered the value left on the loan. I joined the military the next week. Took me 20 years to rebuild my life. Story 31. Just graduated college. 5 months into working an adult job in gap year before grad school. Sister diagnosed with 3rd-degree cancer. She lived across the country. That weekend I flew there and stayed for her treatment. Helped with my nephews, paid their rent, etc. Penniless when I came home. Worth it. Would do it again in a heartbeat. Story 32. Wife's father died, left everything to her. All of the other family are contesting the will. We are $80K deep in lawyer fees so far and haven't even hit trial yet. The rest of the family moved on to his land and into his house the day he was buried and refused to vacate. That was over a year ago. Our lawyers say the trial will cost another $100K. If we lose, we will be broke. If we win, we will be broke and own land that we can no longer afford to keep up, so we'll have to sell a 4th-generation family ranch in order to pay the remaining debts. Only the lawyers will win. Story 33. Gallbladder ruptured while in the process of switching insurance and moving to a new place. $100K med bills, plus I couldn't work for a few weeks on top of utility bills and such. Wiped out everything I had even after my landlord and friends helped a bit. Pa's dad said best he could do was send a money order for $50 to help because my stepmom is a stingy cunt and he's a coward. Told him not to bother. Story 34. I lost my job in 2023 but got enough parting money to take the year off. I did some seriously no-holds-barred soul-searching for months. I was alone because I'd lost all my friends to anti-vax conspiracy theory bullshit during COVID. I was a 3-20 lb self-destructive alcoholic because my depression OCD had just gotten so loud that I was crashing out, drinking myself to passing. And I'd partied too hard 20 years being someone I wasn't, going after a life I didn't even want. So I played my last card and cashed out a 401k with $20,000 in it, then packed my chute and moved to Seattle. I had no plan. Finite resources in one of the highest KOL cities in America, and didn't know the city. And you know what? I have been fudge crushing it. I got a job in about a month, and I'd mostly spent that month getting high, watching YouTube instead of actively looking for work. I make 2x as much money as I've ever made in my life. I got a nice apartment downtown, walking distance to work. My co-workers rock. Everyone loves, respects each other. My depression OCD have waned to minor inconveniences. I switched from adult beverage to plant substance, started really listening to my body, and now I've lost 48 lbs. I bet on me, let chaos take the wheel, and it worked. I'm happy for the first time since I was a kid. Story 35. It's always medical. I'm sorry for those who have gone through this. It is so not fair. The U.S. medical is not better than public. Story 36. My husband decided to trust his parents. They offered him a large paycheck to come work for them part-time and run their business again. After he had left and we started our own small business, it ended horribly. By month 3 of working for them, they violated his contract by not paying him. That went on for 6 months. He was being paid sporadically until one day they just decided to ban him from the building with no warning. Interestingly, it was the day after he sent a demand letter for $45K owed in back wages that they had failed to pay. We had enough money saved to survive him being paid inconsistently. But when he was fired, it caused a big problem. We cashed out our retirement and sold as much as we could. Extra car, dirt bikes, trailer. In February, hoping we could stay afloat while my husband's lawyer works through the court case, it's June, and things have been slow on the legal front, but we are still treading water. Luckily, our business has been keeping us going. But it will take years for us to financially recover from what my in-laws did. Oh, and my in-laws, well, they think that everything is okay. We haven't spoken to them since my husband was fired. They say he is being petty, that the only reason they had kids was so they could care for them like this. I don't think I will have to be around them ever again. Story 37. Went through a divorce, and during that time, S-Guy from my church was stalking me and ruined my life. I needed to provide stability for my child, who was in elementary school, so I couldn't work full-time. Stayed unemployed for 3 years. I was afraid to leave the house, but I had to do something to make money. By the grace of God, it all worked out well for me and my kid. Worked out much better than I could have hoped or imagined 11 years later. Story 38. I got a violation and pregnant and could no longer function. Lost the babies. Lost my job. Was spending all my time trying not to KMS. Truly would have preferred to die, and am not doing much better now. Story 39. We drained our savings account to have a comfortable move and buy new property across the country. We're only around 40 and hope we can get it up again before we have to retire. It was about $80K in savings. The move cost us around $20K, and we spent $50K on a down payment. Story 40. Ex-husband failed to pay taxes on his gigs. He's a professional entertainer at parties for years. He thought he could get away with it since he's only one person. That destroyed us in the marriage. I had to get a second job to help, and we still couldn't afford to pay for the heat. Story 41. My dogs, one right after the other, started getting sick. One congestive heart failure, the next eye ulcers that led to us putting him asleep. The third started having seizures, and today the fourth one had a septic anal gland. I've got 200 left to my name, but it was worth it taking care of my dogs. They are my family, and I will do it all over again. Story 42. I was 17, depressed as fudge, and decided as a last hurrah, I'd take 2 weeks and drive across the country to see Tool and do a bunch of psychedelics. Stopped at a bunch of tourist traps along the way, cause fudge it. Spent every penny I had and went $3,500 into debt on my credit card. Honestly, that trip saved my life. Worth every penny. I'd recommend to anyone thinking of making the final decision to first go on a fudge it trip. Worst case scenario, you won't be there to see the repercussions. Best case scenario, it'll change your life. I was in the latter camp. Story 43. My son's mother came back after a few years and kidnapped him from school. I haven't seen him since, and I've paid about $30K in legal fees. Story 44. Bought a fudge ton of substances to sell because the guy I could get them from was leaving town. He was so impressed he kept up the relationship with me even after he left town. Basically paid my bills for 5 years and saved up enough selling substances to go to college. Quit about 6 months before everybody started getting busted. Moved far away, changed my name because of marriage, went to college, and laid low. The 90s were fun. Edit. I feel like I should mention my life savings was like a couple grand at the time, and I was like 20. Also, it's substances that are legal now, so I'm not going to feel any guilt over that. Story 45. My 10-year-old son was diagnosed with leukemia. Cranial radiation led to a stroke, and doxorubicon caused heart failure. It was 12 years of max out-of-pockets, plus a loss of income for myself, so I could stay at home and care for him. I was bankrupted and very nearly lost our home. The American healthcare system is an absolute disgrace. It is shameful. Story 46. It wasn't so much a single event as much as a chain stemming from one stupid decision. Had a decent job, voluntarily transferred to another city on the other side of the country because I wanted to live there. Had to pay my own way because I was hourly and the move was voluntary. New location, did some bullshit fuckery with my job duties, and I ended up quitting 5 weeks in. Then between being desperate for a paycheck and well accustomed to employer fuckery, I fell for a scam job and it took me 6 weeks to figure it out. By the time I left that, I was 90 of the way through my savings. Then the pandemic came along 4 months later and wiped out the rest, and just now starting to crawl out of the hole of survival debt I dug. Story 47. Getting my house was very stressful at the time, but I own a house with no mortgage payment. Slowly rebuilding my savings, though this year I had to buy a new car, so that has set me back $20K. Story 48. So I didn't have a ton in savings, had about $15K in savings, but I'm pretty fudge poor, so it took me like 6 years of living with roommates to save that much. I was about to use it to buy a small house and fix it up. Then I had to random, very concerning medical issues start happening. Had 2 ER visits and then had to pay for a bunch of scans and blood tests. Then my car decided to have 2 separate $500 repairs, All this happened in the span of 2 months, went from 15K down to 2K, then COVID hit and house prices went sky high. Story 49. Love. I met the love of my life whilst living overseas. My contract ended after 2 years and I had to move back to my home country. She ended the relationship. I spent every last cent I had moving back blindly, hoping that she would reconsider. I spent tens of thousands moving and just waiting. She did not. It broke me emotionally and financially, and yet I don't regret trying. Story 50. Broke my back, lost my job and my flat. Ended up homeless and burned through all my savings I had just trying to stay alive while recovering from spinal surgery in a wheelchair while homeless. To add insult to injury, I got meningitis while in recovery. Story 51. I was dying from adult beverage abuse and checked into a rehab facility. Had to sign over every dollar I had so that I couldn't use it to buy adult beverage. I left 3 days later after another patient tried to stab me. Trying to get my money back was more stressful than almost getting stabbed to passing. Stayed sober 2 years and I now no longer have a drinking problem. So I guess it was the right choice to make. Story 52. Got diagnosed, tumor removed, chemotherapy for cancer. Then my own family stole all my assets thinking I was going to die. Same week. Story 53. I haven't had to, but I work in healthcare. Just a few hours ago, I had a patient tell me that he is out of money and will never be able to work again. He's worried about insurance. He has brain cancer. His wife is also sick, though I'm not sure what with. This guy taught me one of my nursing classes. And now he is just completely depressed. This is America. Story 54. Wife was diagnosed with cancer. She beat it. Worth every penny. Will make more money. Can't replace her. Story 55. I went to the store. Life savings going on food for my family. This is normal for a lot of Americans. We are struggling. Story 56. My dad died. I had to spend my savings to stay afloat, and my savings was money my brother left me when he died. Story 57. I almost died during childbirth in the U.S., became immunocompromised, and left me permanently disabled in my 20s. Story 58. This is a sad thread. So many medical stories. Healthcare shouldn't cost your house, your car, your emotional health. How does one get better worrying about the bills whilst they're lying in their hospital beds? I am sorry to all those who have been affected. Story 59. Parents were in deep debt in 2016 and they had no other way to pay it off. About $80K needed to be paid right away, and then another $200K over the last 9 years. Final payment was in April this year. I am glad to have only a mortgage as my debt now. Story 60. My sister got a lump sum after grandma's passing. Like $56K. She spent it within 8 months. The family considers this a single event. Story 61. USA, wealthiest nation ever. All the stories here are healthcare expense related. Where is our leadership to fix this? Story 62. Broke my foot without health insurance. Lost all my employment income because I couldn't work. Spent $13.5K in medical bills. Total cost around $45K. I still have daily pain and probably need surgery or help, and raise my foot at night with the hopes the pain will go away. It does not. Yay, America. Story 63. Bid on a flipped house. There's still things that are screwy. They put a 2-ton AC unit on a furnace with a 1.5-ton blower. I still don't know why they measure cooling capacity in tons. We should have been cooling to 20 degrees below outside temp. We were managing 2 to 3 because it kept switching off when it tripped the safety. That ate all my backup money. Story 64. My cat ate a tiny piece of squishy plastic that got lodged in her intestines. She had symptoms on a Friday, so had to do everything through an emergency vet, 3 times more expensive than a normal vet. They had to cut open her intestine to remove the object. Took all my savings and a loan I'm still paying off, and I now have pet insurance. Story 65. I once had to spend everything I had to deal with an immediate life-threatening situation. My kid a meltdown over a hamburger Happy Meal, and we just had to get it. Blew all my savings right there. Story 66. First off, I never had massive savings, a couple grand at most. 1. Emotional value towards a car. It was proclaimed dead after inspection, and I still dumped every penny I had to attempting to revive it. It wasn't enough. 2. Forced moving. After yet another quarrel with the missus. I couldn't stay any longer, and I spent that few dimes on a good next interior, which in hindsight was stupid. As I didn't have the capacity to do the upkeep myself, letting this one end in, come pick up this stuff, stranger. I can't take it with me to the next destination. Story 67. Both parents got cancer. They already had financial trouble due to my mom losing her job a few years back, and I had previously sold my apartment and moved back in with them to help them with their mortgage. It was rough going, But we were managing right up until when I lost my job. And within a few months, both of them got cancer diagnoses, colon for mom, bone for dad. What followed was the most grueling 6 months of my life, with me scrambling to find a new job and take care of my parents. We saved where we could, we blew through all our savings, borrowed money from friends and family, were trying to sell the house in parallel. Hell, we even sold off my dad's vinyl collection, as in over 3,000 records, and his hi-fi audio equipment. It was barely enough. Eventually, Dad died, Mom pulled through, we sold the house and used the money to pay off the remaining debts, had some left over for a small apartment, and then went on to pick up the pieces and move along, because what else are you going to do? Story 68, medical bills. My partner refused to go to the hospital because she couldn't afford it, hid it from me until it got so bad she couldn't hide it. Then after I begged her to go to hospital and I'd cover it, the hospital she died in sent me a bill so much I was mourning while hallucinating from starvation. Only wish she had gone and bankrupted me sooner so that maybe she could have had more of a chance at survival. Story 69. Dad had a bowel perforation when I was 14. He survived, but we lost our home, savings, retirement, car, everything. Went homeless for 3 months. Had to move across the country to live with grandparents in the boonies. Lost everything, essentially. He blamed himself and committed tragic end 15 years later. We are still in significant debt from the crisis 17 years later. If he had received medical care at a more reasonable cost, things would have been so much better for my family. Story 70. 85 of these answers are, I got injured sick or a family member did. I'm assuming most of, if not all of these people are American. Story 71. My sister stole over 15K from our mother while our mom was going through chemo for stage IV, esophageal, and stomach cancer. I was 24 and wiped out what savings I had, around 9K, to help my mom. My sister still denies it to this day, even though we had proof. Our mom passed away in 2007 and I still don't speak to my sister. Story 72. I'm seeing a reoccurring theme of healthcare expenses breaking people. So ashamed of this country for that. Story 73. Human medical debt and pet medical debt. Neither of these things should send you to the poorhouse. Absolutely a tragedy. Story 74. Married someone with a severe mental illness, which itself also really stopped me from ending things. Even when it all became very abusive. It's also hard to realize what is abuse when it's not physical. Basically, all my money was drained continually. Eventually, I just shattered and got a divorce. I felt so guilty I gave her 60 after only being married 2 of my runners. What was amazing to me was that as soon as I ended things and she moved out, my finances immediately righted themselves. And when my phone died, I could just afford to buy a really nice new one. And it was barely a blip on my money situation. Pretty much at 30, I had to start 100 from scratch. Interestingly, the next guy she was with doing a gold heist in order to pay for her expensive demands. He ended up in jail. I saw the news stories and told my brother, I dodged a bullet. He said, you dodged a bazooka. Story 75. I had 3 kids all at the same time, and 18 years later, they all went to college at the same time, too. Story 76. Mom became terminally ill, stepped in to save her house and help her for her last 2 years. Still working my way back. Story 77. I win. My husband left the military to pursue a civilian job. So we moved cross-country, got screwed on moving costs outside of the military movers. First last security deposit on a rental. His job was pushed back 9 months, so he was unemployed. 9 months while trying to find other things. I had our second child around 4 months into the unemployment. And then I got a pay cut instead of getting laid off due to economic issues with the company I used to work for. Drained 3 to 4 years of savings, loved it. Story 78. I love socialized healthcare. I take it for granted, but posts like this really remind me why I pay my taxes and keep voting away from those reactionary fuckers. Story 79. I was quite young at the time and only new to saving money. I given birth prematurely and he passed away. Turns out passing is expensive at all ages. Savings gone 5 years later and still struggling to get back up with it. Story 80. I never had a lot of money, but I really did my best to not spend what little I had saved. Then my dog got sick. 6 months I went to vets again and again, but nobody could figure it out until a new vet discovered stage 4 cancer. He had to be euthanized within 24 hours. Cost me everything I had. Now I need to sell everything I own to pay my utilities because I am unable to work. Story 81. I had a medically complex child. Spent 9 months in the hospital after he was born. My wife had to move to a different city for that time and rent an apartment. I had to travel back and forth several times a week to the hospital and work at a 3-hour drive. The first bill, the helicopter, was $30K. The medical bill was $5.2 million. Moving travel was $25K. Sure, we had some help and insurance cover a lot, but we certainly lost our entire $40K savings in my whole retirement to pay off debts so my wife could quit her job. For anyone wondering, is 8 and doing well today? Story 82. I'll add a positive-ish or hint note to the responses. At the age of 46, I decided to take a year off work and just do whatever the hell I wanted. Drained my savings and went nuts. Traveled, bought stuff for my house, helped several people in crisis with medical and other bills, donated to charities and helped rescue cats, dogs, splurged on eating out and clothes. Had an amazing year that I do not regret in the slightest. I went back to work a year ago and started rebuilding my retirement savings from scratch without a bit of guilt or anxiety. Story 83. Got laid off. Had a baby. New administration cut grant funding to a place that hired me. Then cut funding for my startup, NIH. Then the admin cut funding to a college I was going to work at during the interview process. 8 months later, I have a part-time job that covers my bills, but 3 months past that, and I still only have $25 in savings with a baby and a 13-year-old dog under my care. Terrifying. Story 84. Spent $90K on a lawyer to try and get more custody of my child and lost. Ended up paying more in child support and got fudge. Next month, my child was diagnosed with a medical disorder that'll shell have the rest of her life and had to fork out $15K to pay for DRS, meds, EEGs, MRIs, etc. I sold anything I owned that wasn't nailed to the ground to try to make up and help. I couldn't keep up and had to file bankruptcy. I was in shambles when I had to list my dog on the paperwork, and the lawyer said I could have a chance of having him taken. The following month, I had a severe mental breakdown. I was severely depressed for 7 months. I would have multiple severe panic attacks every night. There was a moment I legit thought I was going crazy, sitting in an empty home, empty fridge, and an empty bank account. Story 85. Went into labor at 24 weeks. Full gestation is 40 weeks with twins. Thankfully got the labor stopped, but I was put on hospital bed red. My husband and I didn't make a lot of money to begin with, but we managed to have at least 3 months of savings out back. And it was wiped so quickly between getting things for twins and me not working and collecting very little in short-term disability. Kids were born at 28 weeks, followed with an 80-day stay in the NICU. Our bank accounts were near zero. However, kids survived, and 1010 would do it all over again. Story 86. Not me, but I was an investment counselor for a few years, and I saw at least a dozen nurses use the $250K they saved up for cancer treatments. The hospital they worked for did not give them a discount. Broke my heart. Could only give them the best options they had. The health system was ascension. Story 87. Hookers, liquor, and blow. Pure China white. Coincidentally, it was my first trip to Las Vegas. So when they say whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas is kind of right. Whatever happens in Vegas is that your money stays in Vegas, but you have to leave. LOL. Oh, I did get to see Cirque du Soleil. It was good. Story 88. Last year, I was still on the same phone bill as my dad. The deal was I paid my part of it after giving him my card info. Well, he accidentally, I don't believe that for a second, made my card pay the entire bill and so far has only paid back 100 of the 1,000 he owes me. And he's the good parent. Story 89. Yeah, I stopped reading because most of the comments here would be avoidable with universal health care and a safety net like most civilized countries have. That's just unnecessary BS where people get fudge for things they can't influence while 5 dudes own everything and are richer than God. Story 90. I cashed in my retirement savings of $90K to buy my second house. House appreciated way more than my retirement accounts ever would, so it was 100 worth it. Story 91. I adopted a puppy while I was in college. She was so calm in the shelter, but I quickly learned she had intense separation anxiety. She had chewed through 3 metal crates and I needed to go somewhere, so my boyfriend at the time agreed to watch her. He called because he needed to go to the store and asked if she'd be okay in his bathroom. I said sure, just to move the toilet paper and books. Anything she could destroy. I get a call about 30 minutes later. Come get your F-King dog and bring a shop vac. She had chewed through the toilet and sink connectors. While she was panicking because the water was spraying her in the face, she clawed through the drywall as the bottom floor of the house got soaked. We did our best to dry it, but they had to replace the hardwood floors, the carpet, the wiring underneath the floors, bottoms of the cabinets. Thankfully, their insurance covered most of the $20K in damage this dog did, so I just had to cover the deductible. But that $2K was all I had in my account. He was an abusive jerk, and I left him shortly after. 10 years later, I still tell her she's a good girl, and in case anyone is wondering, her separation anxiety did eventually get trained out. Story 92. Seeing all these replies, if this country promises us we can build wealth, but then takes it all at the slightest stroke of bad luck, then I think I would have done better in a European country making less. Seriously, at this point, I'd vote for almost anyone if they promised universal health care. Story 93. Mother had a large debt to her nursing home during a Medicaid dispute. Still working out the tax issue. Story 94. Not me, but someone I knew once. He was living in Panama, and his father, who was visiting him from the USA, got sick with meningitis. He had to drain all his savings and go into credit card debt to transfer his sick dad back to the USA. This was 33 years ago. He eventually recovered financially. Story 95. I got evicted from the house I was living in. Long story. Flatmates sucked. My car broke down, and I got the flu all at the same time within days of each other. Story 96. My ex-business partner, both attorneys, filed BK after we dissolved the business and cut ties. He filed partnership taxes for our partnership for 6 years and attributed $600K to me for those years. I am still dealing with it, 10 years later. Story 97. Started over from scratch just before COVID hit due to a medical event, then medical bills. I ended up selling everything of monetary value so I could keep living inside. Good times. Story 98. Got laid off while working in a very specific line of work when the global war on terror drawdown occurred and had to move in with my parents. Went back to school during that time and am in a much better place financially. Story 99. Been working ever since 14. Decided to take extended vacation for half a year or so because I've never really had a break. Then came back to struggle of finding a job. Parents got ill and rent plus bills need to be paid. It's been 2 years since. Still no job, all because of this gap. I'm not sure how I'm going to survive. Story 100. I inherited a small amount of money in 2005. We invested them smartly and had enough to put a big down payment on a house in 2008, just when housing prices peaked. Then the crisis hit. Both my wife and I lost our jobs and had to sell. Now at a much lower price, of course. We lost so much money on that house that I have the same amount of debt now as the amount we down paid. I have no hope of ever getting out of that debt. Story 101. Lost tech job and reduction in force event, and then ADHD, depression, and unemployment office being obstructionist means I've been burning my life savings on mortgage plus daycare for months while failing at finding a job that won't lose the house. I am lucky in that my AirFill will let us move in, but would prefer to just have a job. Story 102. My grandkids were in foster care, and I had to move across the country and fight the state for nearly 2 years to get them out of the system. They were being trafficked in the most corrupt state in the U.S. Then I had to get them out of that red state and move back across country to home, where it is exorbitantly expensive to live. All this while in treatment for cancer, having chemo, and then also dealing with cancer for one of the kids. A car breakdown. My English Mastiff service dog dying. Breaking my leg badly shortly before moving due to side effects of immunotherapy. Packing up a trailer and driving cross-country with 2 little kids with a broken leg. My GoFundMe largely ignored. I was so ill from chemo for part of this, having gotten the kids in my home as foster adoptive status, that we had to live on my savings for a few months. I did it alone, and it was terrifying, and I thought at one point I'd die before I got us out because I was so fudge ill. But if I failed, these kids would go back into the system, where they were being trafficked. So yeah, all that can fudge up your finances pretty bad. And meanwhile, the price I paid for our housing there has tripled in price here. Story 103. Oh yes, this one hits hard. You ever hear stories where someone just watches their bank account disappear overnight? Wild stuff. Like one person spent their entire life savings trying to cover emergency surgery for a parent who didn't have insurance. Can you imagine? One moment you're planning for retirement, the next you're Googling how to apply for a second credit card just to afford meds. Another thing, the wedding. Yep, the whole dream wedding thing spiraled out of control. They didn't realize how fast costs added up until they were in too deep. Flowers, venue, DJ, food for 200 people. By the time it was over, they were like, so guess we're broke now. Happy honeymoon? Best advice I get, be wise of handling your finances. Story 104. Fell from stairs 2 months into my first job after uni. Unlike USA, going to dentists is pretty cheap here, so I still had some money. But having to fill out 4 partially chipped teeth was still very expensive, and I was just hired, so didn't have much savings. Story 105. Wow, I knew most of this would be people in the US with nightmare medical stories, but this is actually completely ludicrous. How as a society do you guys just put up with this? I live in a country where those on low income have free healthcare, and those in higher income have to pay a certain amount which we should have insurance to cover. And just as an example, my son's tonsillectomy with an overnight on a semi-private ward cost my insurer less than $1,000. In a situation where somebody doesn't have insurance but can't pay a medical bill, there's an option for a retroactive determination of free medical treatment, so nobody will ever be in a situation of medical debt. Dental treatment is a whole other situation which I could rant about at length, but even at that, you're talking about thousands rather than tens or hundreds of thousands or even millions, like I've seen mentioned on this thread by Americans for medical treatment. I can't imagine being in a country where a medical emergency could bankrupt you, but protesting about immigrant laborers rather than rioting on the streets about basic medical care. Story 106. Medical event. Had nearly 40K saved and now I'm 40K in debt. Not the first time I was this neck deep in debt. Shout out to my student loans. Story 107. I'm so glad to have European healthcare. Half of these posts weren't possible in Europe, Wombat included. Story 108. Europeans reading this, jaw drop emoji. In the UK, you are free to have private health plans too. It's as if many Americans believe socialist medicine means you're not allowed to. It's ridiculous. Story 109. My dog was experiencing kidney failure from an infection. He had to go to the emergency veterinary hospital where he started in the ICU for 1.5 days to flush his kidneys and was actively monitored, and in the hospital for 5 more days. He survived, but the vet prepared us that he would not be long for this world. The visit cost about $10,000 and was a big chunk of our emergency funds life savings that are not locked away in savings. A year later, he is sitting next to me on the couch and enjoying the morning sun while I drink a coffee, and he is thriving. He now has chronic kidney disease, CKD, because the infection permanently damaged his kidneys. But his CKD condition has improved from stage 5 to stage 4 upon release from the veterinary hospital with the flushing and antibiotics to stage 2, today through diet and supplements. Best use of life savings. They literally saved a life. Oh, now he's jumped off the couch and he's barking at the neighbor's rooster. Story 110. A female relative took 5 credit cards out in my name. Debit collection started calling and I had no clue. This was back in the 80s. I was 22 and had my own large landscaping company already. I then found out why she did what she did. I paid them all off and made her an assistant so I could give her a paycheck so she could live until she couldn't. Love you, Mom. Story 111. I do it every week. Groceries, bills, rent, etc. That's because I'm a millennial who has yet to escape living from paycheck to paycheck. Story 112. Amazon Global Logistics took 3 months to import my inventory replenishment from September to Christmas Day when I tried using them for the first time last year. I ordered in June anticipating August receiving. I didn't start seeing cash from the Christmas-January sales until Feb 2025. Brutal and completely out of my control. There is no direct customer support contact. It goes through the normal Seller Central India-based email comms only. I still have inventory that was received in November last year, stuck unable to be sold. I'm about to move it out of Amazon WD into another warehouse because it's been impossible to get a resolution. Story 113. This was back in 2015. My younger sister had some medical issues. Root cause was likely undiagnosed lupus. She was hospitalized with 3 pulmonary embolisms, lung clots, and another 20 clots throughout her lower extremities a few days before her college graduation. I was a graduate student at the time, so I didn't have a ton of savings. I gave my mom and sister $38,000 to help cover the medical bills. It took a few years, but they eventually found a combination of substances that has been working for her. Story 114. On top of no savings, I'm in so much debt, but I do it all again. It gave me an extra 3 years with my heart cat. I mistake some different decisions at the end of hindsight, but they weren't financial decisions. Story 115. Was in a bad car accident at the end of 2019 and couldn't drive for a year as I spent a year recovering from the physical and mental trauma. I used the settlement money to support myself for almost 3 years. Everyone told me the government was giving everyone money during COVID, but I didn't know that and never got any. I could have bought a home with the money I received, but I couldn't work due to my injuries. Story 116. Not exactly, but last year I sold all my Palantir shares to make an addition to my house. I think I sold at 24. Last I checked, it was 136 a share. Story 117. Doctor found a heart defect a few years ago. I was born that way, which meant my heart was in bad shape. I needed emergency surgery. In spite of having excellent health insurance, the initial bill, and there were follow-ups, was over $15,000. Fudge this backwards jerk country. Answer: my emergency open heart surgery was over $850,000, not including any of the follow-ups. And of course, it happened in December, so it crossed into a new calendar year for insurance. So I had to pay 2 years worth of out-of-pocket maximums. I was able to get some financial aid, but I still have about $3,000 left to pay. It's hard to have any health issues in America. Story 118. I haven't had to, but I've heard of people spending big on things like medical emergencies or weddings that got way more expensive than planned. Story 119. I quit my job with the promise of a new job with another company. I knew I should have waited to actually sign the paperwork before quitting, but I was mentally done with the current job. I decided to take the summer off, and it was probably one of the best summers of my life. I was in my late 20s, so my life savings weren't a lot. It was absolutely worth it. Story 120. The housing market crashed in 2009. Had my own carpentry business. Lost everything when it happened. Tried to hang on and did for about a year, but I went from making decent money to almost zero money and went through all of my savings trying to stay afloat. Story 121. I had good health insurance, so the medical bills were not bad, but I could not work while I was sick and receiving treatment. Story 122. I'm about to. My ex-wife is getting my entire savings, and then some, and half of a 401k. The divorce has been dragging on for almost 4 years, and we've been separated for 5. She drags her feet on every step of the process, and I've never seen someone not take $75K as soon as they can. I have a much better job now than when we were together, so we'll bounce back. But it's going to really delay my girlfriend and I buying a house together. Story 123. Thought I could live okay-ish like the middle class at one point, made a dumbass decision, quit my job, even running for promotion that time, and spent whatever I had to go see some guy I was in a relationship with overseas who ended up breaking up with me anyway. Went back home, tried to get back on my feet, but now I'm back constantly looking at my almost empty bank account and struggling at saving up to get back to my previous financial state. I feel like I'm going to die poor since I am racing against time when it comes to getting opportunities, whether I like it or not. It's not like lady luck or financial miracles happen around the corner. Story 124. My sister had a psychotic break, spent it all moving her back home, moved us into the same home, got her a car. She immediately moved out and returned to the boy who has been abusing her. I've been battling homelessness as a student ever since. I may not even have to finish my last year of school. Story 125. My house was crushed by a tree during a blizzard. While home insurance eventually paid out for the repairs, we drained our savings and racked up tons of credit card debt trying to survive in the meantime. Story 126. My house burned down due to an electrical fire, and fighting in court with the insurance company drained my life savings. We're still in legal proceedings a year later, so that's fun. Story 127. My dog needed surgery and we were willing to pay the $17K for it. No pet insurance. But when the day came, he ended up dying on the surgery table. We still paid $5K for his overnight stay though. It was fudge stressful, but we wanted to save his life. Anyway, please get pet insurance in case something like this ever happens to you. Story 128. Emptied my savings to pay off my new wife's education debt. Got that out of the way early. Have rarely been in debt since. Story 129. I divorced with my ex-wife because she found a new man in our previous country. I filled a no-fault divorce and gave her half of our small savings at 35 years old. We separated with $10K. No drama. Restarting with only $10K at 35 years old was difficult, but not anymore. It was a blessing, and I had a very lucky career now 9 years after. Story 130. Made the mistake of not getting health insurance thinking I'd never need it. Ended up being hospitalized and diagnosed with diverticulitis. The hospital was able to discount the bill, but it still drained my savings. Learned that lesson the hard way. Story 131. I doubled my investment. Sold the stocks, but a good news from same company and media made me greedy. Re-entered same stock with all my worth. Good news turned out to be falsely spread. Non-stop lower locks until stock became worthless. Struggled for about 20 years after that. Never had more than bare minimum to survive. Until got married, and that's when things started to ease up. Story 132. Mom died at the end of COVID. Lost my job. Dog had to have back surgery. All within 3 months. I am completely and utterly drained in all my acts. Credit, bank, retirement. Story 133. Tripped on a railroad tie my landlord had in the driveway to separate my driveway from next door on the way to work as a banquet director. Ripped everything in my shoulder, had surgery to try to repair the damage. Immense suffering from pain, worry on how I could even skip one paycheck or afford the surgery. Surgeons said I'll need 3-4 total shoulder replacements in my life, several $1 million years of physical therapy. Maxed out every credit card. Got loans, cannot work a single job requiring the use of my left arm. Could no longer perform my job in any capacity, even though I was a stand-up employee supervisor. Still can't even lift my arm 10 months into physical therapy. Here I am standing in line for food handouts on food stamps. My landlord refuses to give me his insurance to file a claim. Ruined my life. This is a